The Dash 1 currently provides little or no discussion of A-37 departure loss of control characteristics in the high energy, high G tactical environment. The Dash 1 limits discussion primarily to low energy, low G, stall, and spin entries of the type practiced in UPT. I recently had the opportunity to discuss A-37 departure loss of control characteristics with flight test instructors at the Edwards Air Force Base Test Center, who currently practice and teach a variety of A-37 departure entries as a part of the school syllabus. I also received an A-37 departure loss of control demonstration flight piloted by an instructor from the test pilot school, which permitted me to experience firsthand the control inputs required to depart the aircraft, the characteristics of departure, and the effectiveness of a variety of recovery techniques. A complete qualitative and quantitative assessment of the A-37 departure loss of control characteristics and recoveries has not been accomplished, nor is it likely that a departure loss of control program will be established to acquaint pilots with departure loss of control characteristics. The discussion and maneuvers presented here are intended to increase pilot awareness of the characteristics of departure loss of control in the A-37. The specific goals of this presentation are, first, to convince each pilot of the requirement to avoid departure loss of control by acquainting him with the conditions that lead to departure loss of control. Second, to enable each pilot to recognize departure loss of control by demonstrating a variety of departure entries. And third, to prepare each pilot to decide whether to recover or to eject in the event of inadvertent departure. Departure is a complete loss of control. Although loss of control can result from numerous causes, including structural failure or pilot incapacitation, departure is typically associated with pilot-induced loss of control. If flight controls are misapplied, the A-37 can depart controlled flight at any airspeed and in any configuration. The A-37 is a stable and predictable aircraft. It resists departure, but the pilot can cause the aircraft to depart by applying abrupt, mechanical, high deflection, high rate control inputs. Departure is characterized by uncommanded aircraft motions in yaw, roll, and/or pitch. In the A-37, departure is the transition between stall and spin. If departure occurs and pro-departure controls are maintained, the aircraft will enter a spin. The element that is common to stall and departure and spin is stall. The aircraft must be stalled before it will depart, just as it must be stalled before it will spin. If the aircraft is not stalled, it will not depart. Stall occurs at a specific angle of attack without regard to airspeed, altitude, attitude, or aircraft weight. The pilot has sufficient elevator authority at all points within the A-37 flight envelope to cause the aircraft to stall. Most of us recall the nose-low and nose-high spin entries practiced in UPT, which required prolonged misapplication of controls and required relatively long periods of time to progress from stall into spin. In the context of this discussion, those entry maneuvers are best described as low-energy departures. Low-energy stall, aggravated by yaw, leads to departure and ultimately to spin. But stall also occurs in the high-energy regime. Most of us are familiar with high-energy symmetrical stalls. We practice this in the pitch-out stall of the traffic pattern stall series. And we have probably experienced symmetrical stalls during the pull-out from loops and cloverleafs while performing aerobatics. Symmetric high-energy stall is characterized by nose drop or bucking in pitch, with very little tendency to roll or yaw. However, if the high-energy stall is asymmetric, in other words aggravated by large control inputs, the aircraft may depart. If it departs, the aircraft will not exhibit just nose drop or bucking. which is easily controlled by merely relaxing back pressure. Instead, aircraft rotation about all three axes will develop. High energy departures are generally more rapid and more disorienting than low energy departures. If pro-departure controls are maintained, spin will eventually develop. Although the control inputs which aggravate the stall are the same for both high and low energy departures, the mechanisms that produce departure in the high energy regime are dependent on the dynamics of the particular maneuver. In other words, they are dependent on roll rates, yaw rates, and pitch rates. If the aircraft is stalled during high energy maneuvering while attempting to achieve maximum roll rates, with or without rudder, the aircraft may depart due to the effects of roll coupling. If the aircraft is stalled during high energy maneuvering while attempting to achieve maximum yaw rates, as in a loaded rudder roll or a snap roll, the aircraft may depart. Asymmetric thrust, asymmetric stores, and fuel imbalance may also be aggravating influences. These topics are adequately discussed in the -1. But even in these circumstances, the aircraft must be stalled before it will depart. Most pilots are familiar with the concepts of spin as discussed in the -1. However, the concept of a coupled departure, and in particular a roll-coupled departure, may be unfamiliar to those of us whose primary experience has been in straight-wing aircraft. By definition, coupling results when a disturbance about one aircraft axis causes a disturbance about another axis. An example of uncoupled motion is the disturbance created by an elevator deflection. The resulting motion is restricted to pitch, and no disturbance occurs in yaw or roll. An example of coupled motion is the disturbance created by a rudder deflection. The resulting motion is a combination of both yaw and roll. A complete analysis of all the factors relating to roll coupling is complex and varies from aircraft to aircraft. Roll coupling in some aircraft can by itself lead to departure or structural failure. In the A-37, roll coupling can contribute to stall due to an inertial effect which causes the aircraft angle of attack to increase with increasing roll rates. Consider the mass of the aircraft fuselage to be represented by an element mass forward of the center of gravity and an element mass aft of the center of gravity. In analyzing roll, there are two axes to consider. First is the aerodynamic axis, which is the axis about which the aircraft rolls. This axis passes through the aircraft's center of gravity in the direction of flight. Second is the inertia axis, which passes through the aircraft's center of gravity and is in the direction of the element masses. At high angle of attack, the inertia axis becomes misaligned with the aerodynamic axis. The centrifugal forces on the rotating masses cause them to move farther from the aerodynamic roll axis, which causes the angle of attack to increase. Roll coupling is influenced by high roll rates and long roll duration. Another aspect of inertia converts roll to yaw when angle of attack is increased. If the aircraft is rolled, a plane of motion is established which is perpendicular to the flight path. Due to the large mass of the wings of the A-37, the aircraft will tend to continue rotating in the same plane. If the angle of attack is increased while the roll continues, the nose will come up, but the aircraft will tend to continue rotation in the original plane of motion, which converts roll to yaw. In the A-37, roll coupling, inertial effects, and adverse control inputs may contribute to departure by aggravating the stall. But the critical element of departure in the A-37 is stall. If the aircraft is not stalled, it will not depart. Angle of attack is controlled by the pilot using the stick and elevator. The aircraft does not remain stalled if the stick is released, unless the aircraft is in a developed spin. The first step in avoiding departure is avoiding stall. In the A-37, we are able to avoid stall because the aircraft gives us pre-stall warning in the form of aircraft buffet. In the clean configuration, aircraft buffet is produced by flow separation in the wing root area, which strikes the tail. Pre-stall buffet occurs throughout the flight regime, low energy and high energy. However, if flight controls are applied at excessive rates, pitch rates can develop which cause the aircraft angle of attack to overshoot the pre-stall warning point and continue into stall with little or no discernible pre-stall warning. In other words, abrupt, mechanical, high deflection, high rate control inputs means no effective pre-stall warning and could lead to possible departure if the stall is aggravated. In the tactical environment, a pilot is most likely to experience departure when attempting those maneuvers which appear to demand an immediate and instinctive response, as for example, a threat reaction. However, other tactical maneuvers also rely in part on immediate and instinctive responses. These include clearing turns, airstrike control, pop-up ordnance deliveries, and ordnance delivery recoveries. Therefore, departure must be considered a possibility at all times within the tactical environment. Departure requires both stall and asymmetry. We can avoid departure in two ways. First, by avoiding stall. Second, by avoiding asymmetric stall. In other words, if there is an increased chance that you may inadvertently stall the aircraft, then make sure that the maneuver is symmetric. No rudder, no aileron, just pure backstick. A maneuvering technique which will help the pilot avoid departure during maximum performance maneuvering, where maximum turn performance is required, can be stated as roll, set, center, pull. Roll. Unload the aircraft. Maximum roll rate is available. Coordinate the roll with rudder. Set. Establish the desired bank angle. Center. Center the ailerons and rudder. In other words, remove the asymmetry. Pull. Pull to the edge of pre-stall buffet. Maximum G is available. Maximum turn rate is obtainable. The aircraft is not likely to depart in an unloaded maximum rate roll of short duration. If the aircraft is inadvertently stalled while pulling maximum G, the stall will be characterized primarily by nose drop or bucking in pitch, with little or no tendency to roll or yaw. Furthermore, the aircraft will recover immediately from the stall if back pressure is released. Simply stated, if you want a maximum rate roll, roll. If you want a maximum G pull, pull. But if you want both simultaneously and you stall the aircraft, you may depart. Other techniques may exist which optimize roll and turn performance, but the application of this technique will at least force the enemy missile or bullet to hit the aircraft in order to claim a kill. The recovery technique for departure loss of control is an application of the spin prevention procedure with primary emphasis on the most critical element of departure, stall. When inadvertent departure is suspected, immediately apply stick forces as necessary to break the stall. Apply rudder as necessary to eliminate the yaw, and check throttles in idle. Use ailerons to stop the roll only after the stall is broken, and then return the aircraft to level flight. If full recovery controls, rudder and elevator, have been applied, and if the nose remains below the horizon and the rotation stabilizes at an increased rate, the departure has progressed too far for the recovery procedure to be effective. Consequently, a spin recovery will be necessary. The degree of controlled deflection necessary to recover from departure depends on how far the departure has progressed toward a developed spin. In some cases, full controlled deflection may be required. Do not use abrupt control movements, but do use the controls positively. As the controls are applied, the rate of rotation may increase until the controls become effective. Applying stick forces as necessary to eliminate all stall indications is imperative, since any degree of stall will increase the probability of continuing into spin. Departure recovery procedures are most effective when employed at the early stages of departure. Delayed application of recovery controls corresponds to higher airspeed and altitude losses due to rapid energy dissipation. Aircraft response to recovery control inputs becomes slower as the departure nears full spin development, and increased time will be necessary for the controls to become effective. Just prior to recovery, the rotation will be more pronounced and the nose may lower to the vertical. The Dash 1 warns that if loss of control is experienced below 10,000 feet AGL, eject. The Dash 1 does not specifically address the probability of a successful recovery from departure loss of control at low altitude. Inadvertent departure may be extremely disorienting. Departure recognition and reaction times will be substantially increased due to pilot disorientation. Successful recovery from departure at low altitude is unlikely. At very low altitudes, even immediate ejection will not guarantee aircrew survival. In the low altitude environment, the key to survival is departure avoidance. The following maneuvers were videotaped at the Edwards Air Force Base Flight Test Center. In general, the entry conditions are limited to 170 knots and 70% power, in compliance with test center restrictions. Remember that the aircraft can be departed at all flight conditions. The maneuvers presented here are merely representative and are not intended to define all possible departure modes. A variety of recovery techniques were applied ranging from controls neutral to the spin prevention procedure. Additionally, in those instances where the maneuver progressed into a spin, a variety of spin recoveries were demonstrated. The roll-coupled departures are presented first. Each begins with a 45-degree bank opposite the direction of the departure. A full aileron deflection roll is then made in the direction of the departure. After 90 degrees of roll, aft stick and full rudder, if used, are applied. The aircraft departs and entry controls are maintained until the recovery is initiated. The first maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the left using full left rudder. A neutral recovery is initiated approximately 3 to 4 seconds after departure. This maneuver was shown previously in the introduction. The aircraft completes 2 1/2 turns prior to recovery. The aircraft recovers from the departure inverted, nearly vertical, nose low, and approximately 130 knots. Although the recovery procedure is described as a neutral recovery, the pilot actually pushes the stick forward of neutral to break the stall. The rotation does not immediately stop when the recovery controls are applied. The maneuver is entered at 24,000 feet MSL, and the recovery is complete at 19,000 feet MSL, a loss of 5,000 feet. The pullout could have been more aggressive, but the expected altitude loss in this situation would still be approximately 3,500 feet. 45-degree bank to the right, full aileron back to the left, full aft stick, full rudder, wait 3 to 4 seconds, neutral recovery. Recovery complete at 130 knots, altitude loss 5,000 feet.
10 is recovered.
The second maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the left using neutral rudder. A neutral recovery is initiated as soon as departure is perceived. I flew this particular maneuver using control input rates that I use tactically, in contrast to the abrupt control rates in the first example. Because of these slower control input rates, both pilots were able to observe pre-stall buffet prior to departure. Back pressure is continued past the buffet to achieve full aft stick. The aircraft does not overshoot in pitch or pitch up, since the aft stick rate is slower. I initiate a neutral recovery as soon as I feel that the aircraft is starting to get away from me. Back pressure is released, but the stick is not pushed forward. The aircraft recovers immediately upon applying recovery controls with approximately 150 to 180 degrees of bank, an airspeed loss of 10 to 20 knots, and an altitude loss of less than 1,000 feet.
Cobra 10 in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
10.
45-degree bank to the right, full aileron back to the left, full aft stick neutral rudder, immediate neutral recovery, note yawing motion, airspeed loss 10 to 20 knots, altitude loss less than 1,000 feet.
Cobra 10 is covered.
Cobra 10 recovered.
The third maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the left using neutral rudder. A neutral recovery is initiated as the aircraft approaches the inverted. The entry controls are applied abruptly in this example, and no stall warning is observed. The aircraft recovers rapidly after neutralizing the controls, with an airspeed loss of 30 to 40 knots and an altitude loss of approximately 1,000 feet.
Cobra 10 in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
10.
45-degree bank to the right, full aileron back to the left, full aft stick, neutral rudder, aircraft inverted neutral recovery, airspeed loss 30 to 40 knots, altitude loss approximately 1,000 feet.
Cobra 10 Sport, are you recovered?
Roger, Cobra 10 is recovered.
The fourth maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the left using full left rudder. A neutral recovery is initiated after a slightly longer delay. In general, the longer the recovery is delayed, the greater the altitude loss and the greater the airspeed loss.
Cobra 10 is in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
10.
45-degree bank to right, full aileron back to the left, full aft stick, full left rudder, 2 to 3 seconds, neutral recovery.
Left turn. Cobra 10 is covered.
Cobra 10 recovered.
The fifth maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the left using neutral rudder. A neutral recovery is initiated after a 4-second count. The recovery begins at about 2 turns, as the pilot neutralizes the ailerons and elevator, with slight forward pressure on the stick, and applies full opposite rudder. The aircraft does not recover and continues into a developed spin. The pitch goes toward the vertical, and the rotation rate increases. The pilot then initiates a spin recovery. The nose comes up, and the rotation decreases noticeably. As the stick is brought abruptly full forward, the nose pitches down, and rotation increases slightly. Within 1 turn, the spinning stops.
Cobra 10 in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
10.
45-degree bank to right, full aileron back to left, full aft stick, neutral rudder, wait 4 seconds, neutral recovery, Nose lowers, rotation increases, enters spin. Stick full aft. Nose comes up, rotation decreases. Stick full forward, nose lowers, rotation increases, recovery complete.
Passing 18,000.
Roger, recovered.
Recovered.
The sixth maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the right using left rudder. The aircraft continues to the right despite the use of opposite rudder. Entries to the right tend to be slightly faster due to the gyroscopic effect of the engine rotation. This effect does not make departure to the right more likely. A neutral recovery is initiated after approximately 4 seconds, and the aircraft recovers.
Cobra 10 entering the west spin area, cleared to maneuver.
45-degree bank to left. Full aileron back to right. Full aft stick, full left rudder. Wait 4 seconds. Neutral recovery. Aircraft recovers. No spin.
One zero recovered.
The seventh maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the right using right rudder. A neutral recovery is initiated after approximately 3 seconds, slightly quicker than in the preceding example. The aircraft continues into a spin, and a spin recovery is required.
Cobra 10 in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
45-degree bank to the left. Full aileron back to the right. Full aft stick, neutral rudder. Wait 3 seconds, neutral recovery. Aircraft spins. Spin recovery required. Recovery complete.
Passing 18,000.
8 recovered.
10 recovered.
The eighth maneuver is a roll-coupled departure to the right with neutral rudder. Aft stick is applied at a slow rate, but the aircraft still departs. A neutral recovery is used. Stick slightly forward to unload. The rotation increases noticeably as forward stick is applied.
Cobra 10 in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
1 0.
45-degree bank to the left. Full aileron back to the right. Full aft stick, neutral rudder, neutral recovery.
Recovered.
Cobra 10 recovered.
The ninth maneuver is an accelerated departure entry, similar to a snap roll. The maneuver is entered from a stable 2G 170 knot right turn by applying full aft stick and full right rudder. The aircraft departs to the right. A neutral recovery is applied early in the sequence, and the recovery is instantaneous.
Cobra 10 in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
1 0.
2G right turn. Full aft stick, full rudder. Neutral recovery.
Cobra 10 is covered.
Cobra 10 recovered.
The last maneuver is an inverted roll-coupled departure to the right. The maneuver is entered at 145 knots, with a pitch attitude of 20 degrees nose high. The aircraft is rolled to the left to the inverted, using full left aileron, and then the stick is abruptly moved to the forward left corner and held. Departure controls are maintained until an inverted spin develops. The aircraft recovers from the inverted spin as the stick is moved abruptly full aft.
Cobra 10 in the spin area, cleared to maneuver.
1 0.
145 knots, 20 degrees nose high. full left aileron, inverted, stick forward left corner, and hold. Inverted spin develops. Stick full aft. Aircraft recovers.
10 is covered.
0 recovered.
In summary, the specific goals of this presentation were: first, to convince each pilot of the requirement to avoid departure by acquainting him with the conditions that lead to departure. Second, to enable each pilot to recognize departure by demonstrating a variety of departure entries. And third, to prepare each pilot to decide whether to recover or to eject in the event of inadvertent departure. The pilot has sufficient elevator authority at all points within the A-37 flight envelope to stall the aircraft. Therefore, the aircraft can be made to depart at any airspeed and in any configuration. The aircraft will not depart if it is not stalled. Pre-stall buffet will warn the pilot of impending stall, but if high deflection, high rate control inputs are used, the aircraft will shoot past the stall warning point and the pilot will perceive little or no pre-stall warning. A maneuvering technique that will help the pilot to avoid departure during maximum performance maneuvering, where maximum turn performance is required, is roll, set, center, pull. The recovery procedure for departure is the spin prevention. When inadvertent departure is suspected, immediately apply stick forces as necessary to break the stall. Apply rudder as necessary to eliminate the yaw, and check throttles in idle. Use ailerons to stop the roll only after the stall is broken, and then return the aircraft to level flight. The Dash 1 warns that if loss of control is experienced below 10,000 feet AGL, eject. The Dash 1 does not specifically address the probability of a successful recovery from departure loss of control at low altitude. Inadvertent departure may be disorienting. Departure recognition and reaction times will be substantially increased due to pilot disorientation. Successful recovery from departure at low altitude is unlikely. At very low altitudes, even immediate ejection will not guarantee aircrew survival. In the low altitude environment, the key to survival is departure avoidance. In conclusion, the A-37 is a stable, predictable aircraft that resists departure, but it can be made to depart with no perceptible pre-stall warning if abrupt, mechanical, high deflection, high rate control inputs are applied.